Hey, everybody. Welcome to Odd and Untold, the podcast where we talk about all things strange and spooky. And this week, I'm going back to Pennsylvania, not physically, unfortunately, but we're going to be looking at some Pennsylvania Bigfoot reports. And this one is an audience member requested video. And I love doing those. I love getting the feedback and people just asking me, like, hey, will you ever do this? Or I'm from this town. Can you do here? So keep the feedback coming. If you guys have requests, let me know. You can shoot me an email, jason@oddanduntold.com, and I will try to fulfill your request. And I've done a lot of Pennsylvania episodes before. I've done Bigfoot in Pennsylvania. I've done Racetown Ray. I did Centralia, the ghost town that is burning from underground. So Pennsylvania seems to be very popular on my channel. I don't know why. And I was going to do Pennsylvania again, and not this county. I'm doing McKean County, and I was going to do a different part of Pennsylvania, but like I said, I had an audience member request this, so figured I'd do this. Another little note, if you're watching this on the day this is released or the weekend it's released, I'm hoping to be in the Adirondacks with Josh camping at an undisclosed location. You guys will find out when we get back. But hopefully we're going to do another campfire chat and talk about paranormal stuff and Bigfoot and UFOs and anything that pops into our minds, as usually happens with Josh and I. We just kind of have stream of consciousness and we kind of stick to certain topics, but we will do a paranormal campfire chat again. And so look for that the week after. But like I said, if you're listening to this now, the weekend that this is dropping, I'm probably already in the Adirondacks and out of cell phone range and having a good time and hopefully not getting eaten by Bigfoot. So let's get to some more Pennsylvania stories. And some of these are a little bit long, or the follow-up investigation's a little bit long, but there's some cool stories in here, so I want to get to them, and we'll see how many we get to tonight. We'll see how long it takes me to kind of get through them. But yeah, in the meantime, everybody keep, sending those comments, send the requests. I'm happy to do episodes on whatever you guys want me to do in the paranormal world, Bigfoot, cryptozoology, UFOs, ghosts. And in the coming weeks, I'm hoping to have some guests on the show. Again, I've been having some medical issues that can sometimes prevent me from booking guests because the schedule can change on a dime or even going away. So I'm hoping, fingers crossed, that I am in the Adirondacks when you're watching this and I don't have to cancel my trip. So with all that being said, let's get to some Bigfoot stories. All right, as per usual, I am going to the BFRO website to grab these stories. And again, people have their feelings on the BFRO. They love them, they hate them. I'm not getting into that. I'm not making this political or personal. They have good stories on here. It's a great database and I like using it. And like I said, there's some really good stories in here. So we're going to go through some stories tonight. And this first one, possible sightings and strange occurrences close to a couple's home east of Bradford. So Bradford in McKean County. And this was submitted in August of 2014. And I guess there's just lots of different things going on here. So no real specific date. He keeps the specific directions hidden, omitted, because he doesn't want people going there and hunting Bigfoot, which I don't blame him. So let us talk about this story. Observed. My wife and I took an early evening stroll on private land by our residence. We arrived at a campsite about 7:15 p.m., and as we were sitting on a picnic table, we looked out over a small pond and noticed a leaf on a tree fluttering very fast, as if someone was intentionally doing it, I guess shaking the tree and making the leaves fall. There was absolutely no wind at all. To the right of this leaf was a very large black mass moving back and forth methodically. It was between a couple of medium-sized trees, blocking out the background behind it. The sun was hitting the exact spot, and you could clearly see a black mass of at least 7 feet tall and 4 feet wide, just swaying back and forth. We both witnessed this from about 30 yards or less, and my wife said the face looked like a gorilla. All I could focus on was the immense size of the body. This is not the first time we had encountered something. I filed a report back in 2013, which yielded a call from the BFRO. Also noticed in 2013, I sent footprint pictures to the BFRO and received a call from the BFRO. My wife saw a large black silhouette jump the entire road in 2013 as well. Also found tree breaks and stick structures. Other witnesses, just him and his wife. Other stories, the representative from the BFRO, whose name I can't recall, said that the area was a seasonal hotbed for reports in PA. And again, 7:15 at night, clear, sunny, mild in the 70s. So before I get into the follow-up investigation, it's very long, and I'm going to try to just pick the salient points of that. So this story, for one, they do mention the 2013 report in the follow-up. I couldn't find a distinct separate report on the BFRO website, so I don't know if they just didn't find it credible enough to put on the site. It seems like, and I've heard people say this, they cherry pick what they put on the site, but in a way you kind of have to. If things are so easily debunked, why would you put it on the site? So I'm wondering if it just didn't meet the standards to be on the site. Unless it's from a different county, then maybe they were living in a different county at that time. I don't know. So the follow-up investigation is done by investigator Jarrett Johnson, and he says the witness and his wife live on a remote property in a rural area of McKean County near Bradford. Over the past several years, they've experienced a number of interesting occurrences, including 2 brief visual encounters near their home. In speaking to both witnesses, the husband and wife both observed a large, dark figure with a gorilla-like face, observing them while swaying methodically from the shadows at a distance of 30 yards this past August. The recent sighting prompted the husband and wife to contact the BFRO and led to the details within the report. The couple stated that they had started to notice and discuss late night vocalizations past midnight in the woods near their home. So is that related? I don't know. I like this story because we get the swaying again. And we've talked about this in previous episodes that a lot of people see the Bigfoot swaying, and we don't know what this behavior is about. Is it an intimidation tactic? Are they trying to figure us out? It's weird, but we hear this a lot, just this swaying. So yeah, very weird. So to continue, in August of 2013, the wife was driving home on a wet and rainy night when she saw a large black figure in the headlights leap across the driveway in 2 steps. She noted that she clearly saw it, that it was bipedal and was traveling on 2 legs with a distinguished leaping motion. It leapt across the ditch to the side of the drive, landed on both feet in the center of the driveway. It then bounded a second time and disappeared into the darkness of the woods. It happened so quickly that she could only describe a dark, large black figure jumping across the driveway. She described the encounter to her husband, and they began to research the possibility of Bigfoot in Pennsylvania online. The husband stated that he had been interested in the subject since he was a child. So here again, we have something that can't be a bear. Could it have been a person? Possibly. Maybe someone was trying to break into the house or trespassing and saw the car coming and ran. Sometimes at night we can be mistaken. But again, I would think that most adults would know what an adult person looks like versus a large black shape. And this doesn't sound like it's doing something that a human can do. The way it's leaping and landing on both feet and then running into the woods, it sounds really weird. So we'll get back to that. So it goes on to say that after this, and after they started researching Bigfoot, they started hearing vocalizations and tree knocks in the woods at night, and they started finding footprints around their home. And there's supposed to be pictures here. If you're watching on video, you can kind of see on the website. They've tried to attach pictures, which no longer show up, so I can't look at them. But it does make me wonder if this is Bigfoot on the brain. I'm not saying the initial encounters were not Bigfoot, because it definitely sounds like they saw something they could not explain, something that freaked them out. But I think once you start making Bigfoot your focus determines your reality. Now everything that they hear or see, bear prints in the mud can look like Bigfoot prints, and just normal sounds of the woods that may sound a little frightening. Now that must be Bigfoot. So I'm always a little bit cautious about that once people start getting obsessed with it. It's kind of Richard Dreyfuss making the tower with the mashed potatoes in Close Encounters. It's just, it can kind of cloud your judgment. And I'm not saying that this is not Bigfoot. I'm just saying things like this, those little red flags go up in my mind. And I say, is that Bigfoot, or are they just now attributing natural things to Bigfoot because of their initial, what sounds like a very credible sighting? So this is why we have to sort of use critical thinking, question everything, and just start looking at these stories piece by piece. And not that they're lying, but I think it can be very easy, like once you've seen something like this, to then just assume everything else is that. So let us continue. One evening past midnight in August of this past year, the husband heard activity in the yard while lying in bed. It had rained heavily, and he was awakened by the sound of heavy footfalls that could be heard from the bedroom. The witness described that he could audibly hear the squishing of the water from its footsteps. The dog that was on the bed had its hair bristling and standing up. The next morning, the witness found deep impressions in the yard 15 feet from the bedroom. Here are a couple of photos, and again, there's no photos. But he says there is a healthy bear population in the area. It's hard to say for sure what made these. So again, if you have a very muddy ground and it's squishing, you have a bear that weighs 3, 4, 500 pounds and it's sliding around in the mud. It can make tracks that might look like the next morning Bigfoot, especially if you have Bigfoot on the brain. So the witnesses described finding green tree breaks, twists, and a stick structure they found strange in the area after this event. Within the past month, objects have started to be thrown at the house. One recent night in August, around 3 a.m., the husband was woken up by the sound of something hitting the side of the house. We hear this a lot too, the slaps, or it sounds like something hitting the house. The next morning, he found a stone approximately the size of a number 2 gravel laying next to the house. They described that after these events, the family dog began to act strangely. He began to stare out the window in the evening for long periods of time. They would look into the woods and not see anything. So he goes on to detail the story that they initially told, the creature swaying between the trees. And he says, I interviewed both witnesses. They described the creature as dark in color with a height at a minimum of 7 foot tall. Only the wife saw the face of the creature. The man stated that he was initially focused on the body and the size. They described very broad shoulders, about 4 feet across. They saw hair hanging in the silhouette and could see that it was moving in a swaying motion. The man and his wife were surprised at how it seemed to, quote, melt away or vanish so quickly and without a sound. We hear that a lot too. Like Bigfoot will just take 2 steps into the woods and then they don't hear anything anymore. It's just quiet. And it just makes you wonder how these things move and don't make sound. The investigator says, I inquired about the eyes, of which they were not able to provide any details. It does not appear that the creature decided to show or reveal itself and was watching them at the picnic table from the woods. The witnesses feel that their activities and encounters seem to be a seasonal thing occurring at the same time of the year. Their property is located down a long drive and is surrounded by woods. So they're still talking about vocalizations that continue, tree knocks that continue. So no more sightings, but activity, if you will. And again, I really question if this subsequent activity is really Bigfoot related, or if it's because they started researching. And when you start researching, you start hearing about tree structures, you start hearing about howls and vocalizations, you start hearing about tree knocks, about things hitting the house, and then throwing rocks at people. So now it just makes me wonder if every twig that falls on the roof or every piece of debris that the wind blows up against the house or just the house settling, a house settling can sometimes sound like someone taking a hammer to the wall. It's just the wood can pop and make lots of sounds. And I think human nature is just that way, where if it's on your brain and you're thinking Bigfoot and you're just waiting for it every night, like when are the howls coming? And then you hear something, oh, there's Bigfoot. And maybe it's just a coyote sounding weird, or maybe it's just a fish or cat, or a fox, which can sound kind of creepy, or a mountain lion. It could be any number of things. But if you are hyper focused on listening for Bigfoot and hunting for Bigfoot and looking for footprints, you're going to find all that stuff. It's just going to be there. And the same thing happens in ghost hunting. I've just seen so many ghost hunting groups go into a haunted house. They think it's haunted. And every little sound is, oh my God, did you hear that? Oh my God, did you hear that? Oh, did you hear that? And it's usually just the house settling or just normal noises that the house will make, the pipes or the electric or, a tree branch hitting the side of the house. But because they're so hyper focused on ghosts, now every noise becomes a ghost. So I think their initial sighting is really good. I think they're seeing a creature. It's daytime. They're kind of just seeing a silhouette. They can see the hair. They can see it swaying, which we've heard in many Bigfoot encounters before. So to me, that is a good sighting. The wife's sighting about this thing jumping across the driveway, still good, not as good as the first one, but still sounds not like something a human can do. So I tend to believe that they're seeing something strange. The subsequent sounds, I'm not so sure on, but anybody who's watched the show prior to this one knows that I'm not really big into the tree knocks and the vocalizations. I just think if you're not seeing what is doing these things and making these sounds, it's hard to say it's Bigfoot. You might as well just say it's Santa Claus and the Easter Bunny, playing with swords in the woods. Or, I don't know. It's just, we don't know. So to say that it's Bigfoot just doesn't make sense. But these initial 2 stories, very cool. I like these. Okay, so story number 2, this is another long one. So stick with me on this one. And it's not really written very well, so I may lose my place here or there, so I apologize. But this one is several possible incidents over the years in the Allegheny National Forest. starting in 2006 and continuing to the present. This was submitted in 2015, so I don't know if this is still actually going on. But this is in McKean County. The witness requested the location be kept confidential. The nearest town is Kane, and the nearest road is US 6, and observed. Like I said, this is a bit long, so just bear with me. These incidents have occurred over a period of approximately 7 years. The occurrences have not been limited to a particular time of year. I have never, nor has any in our group, sighted a creature. Most have experienced hearing knocks, loud branch breaks, hearing bipedal footsteps emanating from a creature much larger than a human would make, smelled noxious odors, and had that inexplicable feeling of being watched. The place is a cabin which has been in my son-in-law's family for 4 generations. It is located on the edge of the Allegheny National Forest, off the summit of a mountain. Across the lane from the cabin is a large meadow belonging to a local doctor. There are sometimes planted in grain crops, other times allowed to remain fallow. There are other cabins scattered along the lane, none within eyesight of the other. My first trip was in October of 2006. There was no other activity at the other camps. My son-in-law, Eric, and I arrived about 8:30 at night in the darkness. Upon exiting the Jeep, I had an immediate feeling of being watched. I've spent a good deal of time in the woods, hunting, fishing, and hiking. I'm not easily spooked. After dinner, cleaning up and sitting up a bit talking, we turned in about midnight. Around 2 a.m., I was awakened by the sound of the old wooden table and chairs being pushed about on the deck. We determined it must be a bear and went back to sleep. Approximately 2 hours later, we heard something rustling about the fire pit. We did not cook any food outdoors. We brought in all our empty bottles and such when we came in to discourage bears and other critters. In the morning, we found the table and chairs had been moved about, which a bear or even a large raccoon could have done. However, the fire pit had been scattered about, some of the smoldering logs rolled aside. So to stop there for a second, I like that he's saying that it could have been a bear. And in all likelihood, it probably was. It was probably just a bear or a large raccoon, or maybe even a family of raccoons just kind of rummaging through. And even though you think you've brought all the food in, things fall. You drop a peanut, you drop a little bit of grease falls, and, a bear is going to come looking for that. He continues, another time we were hunting in the forest behind the cabin. The topography is typical Appalachian mountain, rugged, steep slopes, ravines, small streams, and bogs. Here and there are small oil seeps as well. We had just descended into a fairly open area, which promised grouse. This was early November, crisp but not cold. We were each carrying shotguns loaded with upland game shells. We were walking approximately 50 yards apart. When we stopped, looked at one another and asked, "What is that smell?" From out of nowhere came the most putrid, overpowering smell. It was not the oil seeps, which have their own sulfur-like smell. This was horrid. It was like a skunk on steroids with a good measure of open septic tank and some rotten garbage added for good measure. We continued on our way. The smell dissipated after about 100 feet. We tried to tell one another it was a dead deer or something, but we both knew better. I worked in a funeral home while in college and have never experienced anything that nauseating. We also had an unnerving feeling of being watched the entire time we were there. So to pause again, here I like that he's trying to find other explanations. But the smell doesn't sound like something dead. It smells like what people describe a Bigfoot smelling like, just rotten garbage, septic tanks, not the skunk smell. The skunk smell could be in there, but usually it's this musky, rotten garbage, sometimes sweet smell, septic tank, not sweet in the good way, just that like rotten garbage sweet. So who knows? He continues, upon relating the above to my daughter, Eric's wife, she stated that she smelled awful odors for no apparent reason as well and felt like she was being watched several times. We have heard howls far in the distance and others within a quarter mile or so of the cabin. There are coyotes in the area, yet these are much longer in duration and have more range. Some start low and rise toward nearly a falsetto pitch. Others have been more monotone, yet will waver somewhat. Others will start low and culminate in a scream. This is not a bobcat, not a coyote, and all members of our party are accounted for. Again, I don't like the howls so much. He's admitting that there are coyotes in the area, but he's saying they sound a little different. So let's keep going with him. In March of 2014, a group of us went for spring opening. There were 5 of us there. As darkness set in, I decided to venture out to the open meadow to observe the winter constellations. This is about 100 yards from the cabin. The cabin is situated on the downward slope, close from the summit, which is the meadow. The area behind and on both sides of the cabin is a fairly steep slope. It is heavily grown with second growth trees, brush, and scrub. There are also a lot of blow-down branches, which makes walking in daylight difficult. At night, it is an invitation for a sprained ankle at best. I was observing the stars and enjoying the silence. I heard footsteps, not in the trail, not in the meadow, but coming up the slope from to the south of the cabin. My initial thought was a bear. So again, he's hearing things, he's thinking bear. As I listened, it was apparent the footfalls were from a biped. I called out if it was any in our group and received no reply. So he hears bipedal. So then he's thinking maybe it's someone in his group, maybe coming up to scare him or something. No reply. Then the steps would start again. I called again, louder, and the steps stopped for a moment. Then they began again, finally stopping by the edge of the lane. There were no lights showing. The moon was in the final phase of its final quarter and just a sliver. So it's dark. If it's someone in the woods creeping up on him, a person probably would not be able to see. You kind of need a full or close to full moon to kind of see in that darkness. So he continues. I started to return to the cabin. I was about 20 yards from where I heard the steps stop along the edge of the lane. As I drew parallel to that area, I heard shuffling of the underbrush, as if whatever it was had turned its entire body sideways to watch me pass. When I entered the cabin, everyone was where I had left them. There were no new leaves, mud, or debris in the doorway. When I asked if they had heard anything, they all said no, as they were watching Planes, Trains, and Automobiles on VHS. Great movie, by the way. Finally, this spring, a group of us went up for a weekend. While sitting about the rear deck, enjoying a fire and talking, a member of our party was encouraged to do their howl. So here's where I start losing them. They did their howl. Then about 30 seconds later, the sound of a very large tree limb snapping came from down the slope behind the cabin. Could it have been a bear stepping on a branch? Perhaps, but that would be very coincidental to step on a limb just after a howl. Not necessarily. If you're yelling and this creature's like, oh crap, there's people here, I got to get out of here, it could have started running or walking quickly and stepped on a branch and snapped it. So he says, I know there is something in those mountains. I can't prove it physically. It is one of those things that you know, that you know, that you know. Please keep this location undisclosed. We would hate to see a bunch of people go hunting for these creatures. They don't deserve to be pursued and bothered. I've been needing to share this with someone who won't think I'm off my rocker. Thank you. He says, also noticed sometimes the forest will go dead, silent, and still. Not a bird, not a squirrel, nothing moving or making any sounds. Even the woodpeckers stop their pecking, which does happen. If there's a predator in the area, they will go quiet. It doesn't mean it's Bigfoot. So I question this. So the follow-up investigation report by BFRO investigator Paul Mateja, and Paul says, I spoke with the witness at length. The incidents described in the report are entirely consistent with known Bigfoot behavior and my own personal experiences over the years. The location is south of the Jacobs photo site, but the witness requested the exact location to be kept confidential. So the Jacobs photos, I've put them up in here before. It's a trail cam. I'll put them up again now so you guys can look at them. But if not, you can go to the BFRO website and just look for the Jacobs photos. And to me, it just looks like a hungry bear. It looks like a bear that's a little skinny, maybe hasn't gotten enough food. So, but this is, I guess, taking place near that, where that happened. So to analyze this, there are parts of this that I like, and there are parts of this that I don't like. He's never seeing anything. So it's a lot of sounds and smells, and I feel like I was being watched. And if you're in the woods, you're going to feel these things, you're going to hear these things. But my question is, was it a Bigfoot or was it another large predator? Was it a mountain lion? Was it a bear? Was it coyotes? He says all these things are in the area. So I appreciate him talking about these things. And yes, these are all things that are attributed to Bigfoot. To say that they are known Bigfoot behaviors, that bothers me a little bit, because we don't know. We don't know that these things are Bigfoot behaviors. Maybe Bigfoot doesn't howl at all. We just hear these things in the woods and we say, oh, it sounded like an ape, so it must be Bigfoot. The tree knocks. Well, it's not a person out there doing it, so it must be Bigfoot. But like I said earlier, maybe Santa Claus is out there. Maybe that's what he does in his off time. He just goes out into the woods and bangs branches on trees. I don't know. It's just as likely. So I do appreciate him assuming at first that these are known things, coyotes or bears or skunks. It's the leap to, it's Bigfoot. And I know there's something in the woods. That is not good evidence. It's not good for the study of Bigfoot. It's not good for the community, because people are going to hear these things and say, oh, he's definitely got a Bigfoot. and it doesn't necessarily mean that. So I included this one just to kind of go over that just because things sound creepy or you smell something or the forest goes silent, those can all be natural things. It doesn't mean it's Bigfoot. He hasn't seen anything. And I typically don't like stories where there's no sighting. If there's a sighting, then yes, then we can maybe say these things are attributable to the sighting of the creature, but he's never seen anything. So this one, I'm going to say maybe just more of an overactive imagination. I don't know, though. I mean, maybe it is Bigfoot, but the skeptic in me has to say no. All right, so here's another long one, so bear with me. Man recalls his encounter after riding his dirt bike as a young man near Bradford. So a lot of these things are happening near Bradford. This is from 1973. He doesn't have the exact location here. Nearest road is West Washington, and observed. My encounter happened at the end of summer of 1973 or in 1974. It was late August, early September, as it was the time the blackberries were ripening. I was 15 or 16 years old and had a dirt bike that I rode on the many lease roads in the hills surrounding Bradford. The bike had an expansion chamber, which is an extremely loud exhaust system. I generally rode it every day on the hill behind our house in Bradford, so I knew all the roads and trails. My grandfather had built a lot of the roads with a bulldozer years back, working for the Kendall Oil Company. We had also hiked this area extensively when my friends and I were kids, sometimes camping for the night. On one occasion, when we were about 9 or 10, we were chased home by a frightening screeching in the late morning from the top of this hill, just two of us. We didn't know what the noise was, only that we had to run from it. I only mention this as it was very close to the same area as where I had my encounter, and in my mind, the same animal. So to pause there, this is interesting to me because, one, I don't know of many things that would screech and chase people out of the woods. Most animals, they're going to run from people. Does it mean it's Bigfoot? No, but I like that he gives a little bit of context here, and just like something that happened in his childhood that at the time they just thought was a scary animal, and then years later something does happen. So he continues, the day of the encounter, I had ridden up to the road at the ridgeline of the hill and about a mile and a half towards the hospital area. I didn't turn that way and instead went straight toward the pipeline, which is a cleared area that runs straight up and down the mountain. I stopped there for a second and turned back around about a quarter of a mile to a group of blackberry bushes. I shut off the bike and started picking the berries until the bees got to me, and I took my handful of berries and walked away. I walked back to the pipeline, stopping right before the clearing, hoping to catch some sort of animal crossing the clearing. So probably looking for deer or fox or just anything. I had been a hunter since I was very young, which is the custom in the area, and was very good at walking quietly in the woods. As I looked down the hill from the top of the clearing, I could see what looked like a bear digging into a log that had been placed across the pipeline to keep people from using the cleared area as a road. I reasoned that he had heard the noise of my bike going away, so he figured I was out of the area. The stink of the two-cycle engine also probably masked my smell as well. I was young enough to think I should get a closer look, so I got myself to a point about 50 yards away and uphill from the animal and about 25 yards from the ridgeline road. I stood there and ate the berries and watched what I thought was the butt of the bear visible above the log. Remember, the log was about 50 yards down a steep hill, and the log was about 3 feet tall and crossing the pipeline. So a big log, they put it there so people couldn't drive or ATV or whatever. The bear would have to be very large for me to see as much as I did, which was a good foot or more above the log, and he was on the other side of it. So 4 foot tall, which bears don't usually get that tall. Black bears, we don't, in the East here, we don't have grizzly bear. He continues. He seemed to be digging for bugs or something in the log. After a few minutes of me standing still watching him, he suddenly realized I was there. He stopped, tried to remain still for a minute, and all the time I still thought I was watching a bear. So I like that. I like that he's not thinking Bigfoot. He's like, oh, cool, a bear. Big bear is there. Then he stood up. This was no bear. It was the most surreal moment in my life, either then or now, and I'm 52 years old. He was tall, at least 7 feet, and his knees were just barely covered by the log. He had hair like that of a black bear's fur at that time of the year, basically the same color and length, which obscured a lot of the features on his face. We both stood there frozen for a minute, staring at each other. My thought was to get out of there, but the only movement I could muster was to drop the few berries I had left. I started dropping berries, and he just turned and walked to the far side of the pipeline and into the woods, down a trail to his side of the log. I say walked because it was so smooth and graceful across that terrain that I was completely overwhelmed. As I said, I thought I was pretty good at getting around in this terrain, and I am. The movement he used was so economical and efficient that I still see it in my mind and marvel. There was very little or no bobbing up and down. His arms swung, but not wildly like you would expect with an ape. The arm swing wasn't like a tightrope walker either, as I may have needed to do to walk across the area he walked. It was just smooth, amazing. So we hear that a lot in these reports, that these creatures just, they move over the terrain much more smoothly than any person ever could. And these are people who are used to this terrain. These are hunters, these are hikers, these are campers, these are people who are used to that. Sorry, something just fell in my room. So yeah, people will report that these creatures just move so smoothly. They're used to being there. This is not a man in a suit, because an unburdened person would have trouble over this terrain. And then if you put a ghillie suit on or a gorilla suit, they're not going to move that smoothly. So he continues. I stood for a few seconds after he disappeared, then decided to get myself out of there. I ran back to my bike and headed the other way as fast as I could. Then I started thinking I should go see where he went. I turned around and headed back and down that pipeline to the tree. I got the bike to the trail he used, which is a trail that immediately takes you from light to deep shade and stays perpetually muddy. I've tried that trail a few other times with the same friend who was chased with me years earlier, and have only been able to go a few yards before I had to get off the bike and push. I started to get bogged down, so I got back out as quick as I could. I don't know what I was thinking. I guess I thought the noise would keep him away, but when I hit the mud, I remembered that I couldn't take that trail. It was always creepy dark back there, too. I wouldn't have gone back there if it weren't to prove to myself that I didn't have to run away. I never looked for tracks. This is something else that's very strange. I was a hunter. I looked for tracks everywhere. The muddy trail was probably covered with them. This has always bothered me. I can only think that my mind was so sure that no one would ever believe me that proof was the furthest thing from my mind. The whole experience was so alien that I never told anyone for 25 years. Back then, all the Bigfoot sightings were in Washington, Oregon, California. No one would have believed me. So yeah, a lot of people, the general population, if they hear Bigfoot, they're thinking Pacific Northwest. They're not thinking New York or Pennsylvania or Florida. He continues. Maybe I also didn't want anyone to find him. I felt extremely special to have had this experience, and I didn't want to betray that or the Bigfoot. Anyone from Bradford will now be able to figure out where this happened from my story, and that bothers me. I don't think they should be chased. They seem to be a very human animal and maybe too valuable to our world and weapons. I'm posting this after having read the other Bradford sighting, as I talked about earlier, and seeing the Elk County photos. He's talking about the Jacobs photos again, which I'll put up here again, but you can just find them online or the BFRO website. I did quite a bit of hunting in Elk County, and it's very easy for me to believe that these photos show a real Bigfoot animal. As to the 1963 Bradford sighting, the Barber Street location is very close to my sighting, and I will leave it at that. No other witnesses. This was in the afternoon around 4 o'clock. So, interesting encounter. And there's a follow-up investigation by investigator Kathy Betts. And again, I will try to pull the salient information out of here. So she said she spoke to him over the phone, the witness, Mr. P, over the phone and via email, and he added some additional details. And again, she says the Elk County photos he's referring to are known as the Jacobs photos, and there's a link here. And I will link to all these below, so you guys can just go into the description and find all these links. So he's telling her about his experience and how he's creeping up on this bear that's digging in this log. And he said, suddenly a face popped up over the log and it made a grunting noise. He doesn't mention this in the story. And he says, I saw then that it was not a bear, but a hair-covered face that looked almost human. I was frozen. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Then it stood up. I knew then that it was definitely a Bigfoot, and he stared at me for what seemed like another minute, looking me right in the eyes. Mr. P believes at this point the creature was trying to intimidate him, so making the eye contact and like staring him down. He said he was terrified at that point, not by the actions of the creature, but what it was capable of. So this is something, you know, I mean, even a bear, black bear don't get very big. They're not huge, you know, they're not grizzly bears or brown bears or Kodiak, you know, if they stand up, they're 5, maybe 6 feet tall. And again, a hunter, someone who lives out there, any normal person knows what a bear looks like. Bears are not Bigfoot. So she goes on to say, after a minute or so of standing still and having the creature still glaring at him, he purposefully, but still feeling terrified, decided to drop a few berries with the thought that this might break its concentration, and this worked. The creature then turned and walked to the far side of the pipeline and then into the woods. So dropping the berries was when he tells the story initially, it just sounds like he's scared and maybe just dropping them. But here he sort of clarifies that it was purposeful, just kind of like maybe that'll distract the creature. He says the terrain it walked over was very rough, but he said it walked over 45 or 50 feet in 6 or 7 strides, and it swung its arms. So again, this is not a bear. Probably not a man in a ghillie suit. It just, why would somebody be out in the field doing that, hoping somebody came by? Just weird. And then he gives a better description of the creature. He says it stood 7 feet tall, but it could have been taller. And again, our perception, especially during times of distress, can be a little off. I mean, we know when something is big. We know like this is too big to be a person, but is it 7 feet tall? Is it 8 feet tall? We're not going to be exactly right about that. Sometimes we're lucky, like these witnesses will see something by a tree and they can say, oh, it was by this branch. And that branch is 7 feet tall, and that's where its head reached. So it was probably 7 feet tall. But this is out in a field. So he says its hair was dark brown, colored with reddish highlights. The hair was longish on its shoulders and head, with an almost shag hairstyle configuration on its head. He says, although he tried getting a good look at its face, he could not recall any details. He does adamantly recalled that it looked more human than ape. We hear a lot of this. Some people say it looks more ape-like. Some people say it looks more human-like. I don't know if that's different species, if it's just different perceptions. One person may look at it and say, that's a gorilla. That looks like an ape. And someone else may look at the same thing and say, no, it looks very human. So hard to say. Its arms were long and hung down to its knees. He does not recall any details of the creature from its waist down, since the majority of the sighting occurred behind the huge fallen tree and because he was looking at the creature on the slope of a hill. He described the head as being rounded like a human's head. He said that it did not appear conical. So that's weird. Usually we hear about the conical head. He's saying it appeared round. He said the shoulders were massive with a very muscular neck. Again, this is not what a bear looks like standing up. Bears standing up are very sort of rectangular looking. There's no broad shoulders. It's just head, shoulders, legs, just like a rectangle. He could not make out any ears. He recalls that it was very masculine in its proportions. Besides the broad shoulders and chest, it had a relatively slim waist. There were no obvious genitals. So this is a really good sighting, in my opinion. He's used to being out there. I mean, this happened in 73, so a long time ago. But when you encounter something like this, it's going to stick with you. And he has a good number of details without exaggerating, without filling in the blanks. He's saying this, he looked into its eyes, but he didn't really get a look at the face. But he got a sense that it was more human. He doesn't remember details so much, but this thing was staring at him. And again, the whole thing just sounds very traumatic. It just sounds legitimate. It doesn't sound like he's making this up. It doesn't sound like he's adding details or keeping details out. He was out. He saw a bear, what he thought was a bear. And then the bear stands up and it's bipedal and it walks into the woods on 2 legs, swinging its arms. A bear is not going to do that. A bear does not have broad shoulders. I'm going to keep putting up this photo of a bear standing up so you guys can see that a bear standing up does not look like a man at all. So for skeptics to say, oh, you saw a bear standing up, it does not look at all like a humanoid ape man or a hairy man, or it looks like a bear. So this one, it's a long one. He's got a lot of detail in here, but this is a good sighting. He got a decent amount of detail out of this, and brave of him to go back. And again, he says he's almost angry at himself for not looking for footprints. And I think that's just, your adrenaline in the moment. You're not really thinking logically. You're just kind of like, what was that? And then you leave, and then a few days later, you're like, oh, I should have looked for prints. I should have done this. I should have done that. But he was just in shock. And when people are in shock, they don't always think straight. So good sighting, like this one. Very creepy and cool. Okay, so our last story from McKean County in Pennsylvania. A lot of cool stories tonight. This one, teens chased by upright running animal near Bradford. So again, Bradford, McKean County. This is from 1963 in October. Location details. He says, today it is the South Center Street surrounded by hills. Nearest town is Bradford. Nearest road is Barber Street. And observed. I am now 57 years old. I have told many people this story, but never reported it. I lived in Bradford, PA, where I grew up. I was 15 years old, and we played softball at night with my friends. This incident happened on Church Street. Not there now. It is now South Center Street. But we were playing ball one night, as we always did. There was about 10 of us playing in a field by the creek on Barber Street. We played until it started to get dark. We all started home in different directions. It was getting dark now, and me and my friend was all that was left. So we started home. I stopped because my shoe was untied. I leaned down to tie it, and my friend was waiting for me. I started to get up for our trip home when I looked behind us, seeing a very tall figure standing about 20 yards from us. I said, "What is that?" And about that time, it started running at us. We ran as fast as we ever had to get out of there. It stopped chasing us, and we went to my house where we told my father. We took some flashlights back to the area, but found nothing. To this day, I know what chased us. Long arms and maybe 8 to 10 feet tall. I never seen it again, but heard screams coming from the hillsides very often. So this was a dark, clear night, dim lighting, but could see the creature coming at us. So again, this is not a bear. Let's go over the follow-up investigation by BFRO investigator Stan Courtney. He says, I spoke with the witness by phone. He stated that the animal was very large and had come up from the bank of a nearby creek. He was also emphatic about it being upright and bipedal. The witness described the animal as having extremely long arms and a very long stride as it ran towards them. So not a lot of details here, but it's dark. Could this have been a man? Could this have been just some crazy guy fishing down by the river who wanted to come up and scare the kids and running at them? Who knows? He's saying it had long arms and maybe 8 to 10 feet tall. As I said earlier, our perceptions can be a little bit off when we're traumatized, when we're being stressed. But at the same time, we know when something is larger than a person. We know when something, our brains are just programmed that way. When something is not right, maybe we can't even pinpoint it, but when something is not right, our brains know it and it bothers us. So probably not 10 feet tall. We don't really hear about too many Bigfoot that are that tall. It's usually the 7, 8, sometimes 9 foot tall range, but 10 is a little bit tall. So I'm guessing this was probably close to 8, but he was 15. He was scared. And so maybe in his mind, this thing is a little bit bigger than it really was, but a good sighting, not great. And maybe it was better. I don't know why there's not more detail here. Maybe he didn't see the face. Maybe he did. Maybe he saw hair. Maybe he didn't. I don't know. But he's saying long arms. It was bipedal and it chased them and it was very tall. So an interesting story. He says he's 57 now. He submitted this in 2004. So 20 years ago. So now he's 77, 78. A cool story. And again, things were just different back then. They're all playing, softball. They're out at night and they're just walking home in this rural area and this thing runs at them, which sounds very aggressive. And sounds like it was just chasing them off. If it wanted to catch them, I'm sure it could have, and he would not have lived to write the story to the BFRO. Cool story. Again, I wish it had a little bit more follow-up to expand on the details a little bit, but maybe there just weren't any. So, but I like this one. All right, everybody, 4 more stories from Pennsylvania, McKean County. These were mostly good. There was the one story where the guy was just really hearing things and smelling things. And I like how he went into detail about it. And some of them do sound a little Bigfooty, but without ever seeing the creature, I don't think anything can come of that. I think we have to dismiss it because there's no corroborating sighting. There's no corroborating evidence to say that this might have been Bigfoot. So that one I want to throw out, but I like including those stories sometimes. They're not exciting. They're not sightings. But I think it's good to sort of go over them and analyze them and see why they're not great. Why we can read about them. We can incorporate them onto the site, but they're not really good for the overall study of Bigfoot because anything could have made those sounds or smells, the feeling of being watched. I mean, I've been in the woods and I felt like I was being watched. Maybe something was watching me. It could have been a raccoon for all I know. It doesn't mean that it's Bigfoot. It's just, yes, listen to your instincts, but your instincts don't always mean that it's Bigfoot. So this is why we have to question everything and just go over these stories. And I like doing that with you guys. And you guys bring up a lot of good points too. It's things I don't always think of. So I love the dialogue. I love going over these things. Questioning does not mean disbelieving. It doesn't mean that these people are liars or hoaxers or that they're cranks or that they're hallucinating. It just means as objective observers, we have to go through these stories and say, what did they really see? Could this have been this? And I do it plenty where I'm like, this is not a bear. Like this guy either saw Bigfoot, saw a man in a costume, or he's making it up. Like those are your 3 options. It wasn't a bear. So I like doing stories like that just to debunk it a little bit. And I'm going to do an episode in the future. I've been kind of planning it out in my mind of just why debunking is good and to try to find some stories that are easily debunkable. And people may not like that because I get a lot of emails from people saying, why do you debunk certain stories? And we have to question things. It doesn't mean I'm being disrespectful to the witness, because I tend to believe that most people who put these stories out there are sincere, but sincerity doesn't mean facts. It doesn't mean they actually saw Bigfoot. So we do have to question those things. So there's my spiel about that. If you guys have a Bigfoot sighting you want to tell me about, ghost stories, local legends, if you just want to chat, shoot me an email, Jason at I can't even say my own email address, Jason at oddanduntold.com. This is why I put it up there, so you guys can read it. And I'm getting tongue tied. I need a sip of water, maybe. So, yeah, until next time, everybody, embrace the weird, question everything. I hope you enjoy these Bigfoot stories. Again, if you have stories of your own, feel free to contact me, and we will see you next week, hopefully with paranormal campfire chat with Josh. So rock and roll, everybody.